Hey everyone, before we get into today's Forgotten Life, a big thanks to today's sponsor, Skillshare. If you don't already know what Skillshare is, well, it's an online community where you can take courses on literally any subject you're interested in, from leadership and creative writing to lifestyle and photography, and so much more. I highly recommend it, and a course I've recently been enjoying is Productivity Masterclass, Create a Custom System That Works by Thomas Frank, which is making me rethink how to be productive, which allows me to get so much more done. If you're curious and interested in learning, Skillshare is definitely worth it, and it only costs $10 a month with an annual subscription, and you'd really be helping out the channel. Make sure to check out Skillshare as soon as you can, because the first 1,000 of my subscribers to click the link in the description will get a free trial of premium membership, so you can explore your creativity. Queen Nani, otherwise known as Nanny of the Maroons, has become a celebrated figure and national hero in Jamaica, even appearing on the country's $500 bill. While her biographical information is quite sparse, the story of Queen Nani has been passed down through generations in Jamaica, inspiring millions even today. Nanny was the leader of the Windward Maroons, who were a tribe made up of former enslaved people living in the eastern or Windward area of Jamaica during colonial times. She was born around the year 1686 and was described as a small wiry woman with piercing eyes. As a woman who came to be living among the Maroons, the story of Nanny has become a centralized part of Maroon culture and history. She played a leading role in the liberation of slaves and the fight for their freedom. Originally, Nanny was born in modern-day Ghana, of the Akans people, but there are different accounts as to how she ended up in Jamaica. Some historians believe she was more likely to have been taken there as a slave, while others believe she was always free. One account even suggests that she arrived in Jamaica with her own slaves, and another claims she was descended from an African royal bloodline and arrived in Jamaica to marry a Maroon man named Adu. One of the more heroic accounts of her life tells the story of her aboard a slave ship, from which she jumped off into the sea in an attempt to swim to shore and run to her freedom. What we know for sure is that she did not have any children of her own. Enslaved peoples from all over Africa were brought to Jamaica, with many attempting to flee into the hilly terrain of the island. Communities like that of the Maroons began to form from runaway slaves, but the Maroons would play the biggest part in winning their freedom. Aside from the Guyanas, Jamaica had the largest Maroon population in the British colonized Caribbean, with Portland, St. Thomas in the east, St. Mary, Trelawney, and St. Elizabeth being the parishes with the largest concentration of Maroon inhabitants. The history of the Maroons became more prominent after the British captured Jamaica from the Spanish. The enslaved peoples that were previously owned by the Spanish were freed before they left, and these slaves also joined the Maroon community of the island, becoming a core part of what became known as the Windward Maroons. Later on in the 17th century, two main communities of Maroons existed. These were the Windward Maroons and the Leeward Maroons. By the 18th century, these Maroon communities were led by Nanny, who shared the leadership of the Eastern Maroons with Kawau, Kujou, and Akompong in the west. These communities thrived by sending traders to local towns in order to exchange the basic essentials for weapons and other useful items that they could utilize in their fight. From 1665 until the 1730s, the Maroons led most of the slave rebellions in Jamaica. The British had a powerful military in open combat, so the Maroons used their knowledge of the local terrain, engaging with the British in guerrilla warfare, often raiding plantations and properties owned by slave owners, with the objective of freeing the slaves that were being held captive. As a result, the Maroons continued to grow, with more people joining them who were willing to fight for the freedom of other enslaved people. Queen Nani became the most prominent figure when it came to organising highly successful raids. She is accredited with having freed more than 1,000 slaves in her lifetime. Nanny and the Maroons used long-range communication via a cow horn called an abeng. This allowed the Maroons to send messages over long distances, which the British couldn't understand. Nanny would also have her soldiers master the use of camouflage to launch surprise attacks. According to sources, Nanny commanded more than 3,000 soldiers at one point during her leadership. By 1720, Nanny and Kuau, who was also sometimes referred to as her brother, settled in the Blue Mountains. The settlement was later given the name Nanny Town and was placed at a strategic location overlooking Stony River, on the top of a 900-foot ridge, which made a surprise attack by the British extremely difficult. This didn't stop them though. The British managed to overpower Nanny Town on more than one occasion, but decided against holding on to it after numerous attacks from the Maroons. When the British decided to leave Nanny Town, Queen Nani took the Maroon community and made it a settlement once again. In 1734, Captain Stoddart led an attack on Nanny Town, which he claimed was situated on one of the highest mountains in the island via the only path available. He found it steep, rocky, and difficult, and not wide enough to admit the passage of two persons abreast. The British reached Nanny Town and destroyed it, leaving the Maroons to find and establish new settlements. The British had run into numerous traps set by the Maroons, in which they would follow decoys into ambushes. In retaliation, planter and politician Brian Edwards wrote in his narrative of the events, Captain Stoddart found the huts in which the Maroons were asleep and fired upon them so briskly that many were slain in their habitations. Nanny was successful in setting traps and launching ambushes on British troops, and she gained a reputation for being a great planner and strategist. Some even thought she had magical powers. Some records claim she was an Obeah woman who practiced the religion's belief of African folk magic, which was also practiced in some parts of the Caribbean. It was said that after she planted pumpkin seeds, they would sprout after just a few days, which would allow her to feed her people, as well as being invincible to the musket bullets of British soldiers. To increase the enemy's fear, Nanny's soldiers would never kill all of the enemy's troops. She would always allow a small number of the attacking force to live, so they could return to their base and relay the story and horror of the encounter to the other troops who thought about launching an attack. Mozambican historian and novelist Mario Azevedo tells us that Nanny served the Maroon community primarily as a strategist, and that she did not engage in the fighting herself, although she did kill British soldiers and sentenced many more to death. In 1739, the Maroons and the British came to an agreement by the end of the First Maroon War. A peace treaty was signed by the British and Cudjoe, and later that year, another treaty was signed between the British and Kuau. In 1739, when Kuau signed the second treaty with the British, it is reported that Nanny was initially angered at the prospect of signing a treaty with the British, although she did sign a land agreement in 1740. This treaty granted the Maroons their own land, entitling Nanny and the people now residing with her and her heirs a certain parcel of land containing 500 acres in the parish of Portland. The Maroons rebuilt Nanny Town, which later became known as Moortown. In 1781, the Assembly agreed to buy an additional 500 acres of land from neighbouring planter Charles Douglas, which increased Moortown's communal land to a new total of 1,000 acres. Despite the turbulent relationship initially between the British and the Maroons, their relationship seemed to have gained stability, and they even began to work together. The Maroons even gave the British their allegiance in the event of an attack by the French or Spanish. The British government officially recognised two Maroon towns, Crawford's Town and Cudjoe's Town, which later became known as Trelawney Town. This grew to 5 later in the 18th century. The 5 official Maroon settlements were Accompong Town, Trelawney Town, Charlestown, Scots Hall, and Nanny Town, each with their own chiefs and British advisors. Nanny Town was later named Moortown, presumably around 1760, after the governor Sir Henry Moore during Tacky's War, which the Maroons helped to suppress. The Maroon communities also worked for the British in order to increase trade relations, bringing more prosperity to the country. In turn, they created a culture derived from both European and African heritage, which in turn created a unique Maroon culture. Despite her association with magic and more imaginative tellings, her contribution to Jamaican history has elevated her to the status of a national icon. She managed to unite the Maroon people and bring about a treaty with the British, which saw her people gain their own lands. She is believed to have died of natural causes in her old age, possibly at 84 years old, around the year 1760. According to Maroon oral history, Queen Nani's body was buried at Bump Grave in Moortown. Thank you everyone for watching this video on Nanny the Maroons. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, leave me a comment down below and make sure to leave a like on the video. If you're new, why not subscribe, and make sure to have notifications turned on so you can get all my videos as soon as they're uploaded. Be sure to send me any suggestions to my email or Instagram, which are both in the description. And anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks!